Well, it's everyone's favorite time of week, the NFC West Huddle, where we break down the most competitive division in all of football. I'm Aaron Levine. We are joined today by Gerard Moncure in Los Angeles, Bailey O'Carroll in San Francisco, and Robbie Baker in Phoenix. This week, we've got an NFC West rematch in Arizona between the Cardinals and the Seahawks, the Rams hosting the red-hot Buffalo Bills, and the Niners hosting Chicago. Now, all other shows tend to end with predictions, so let's start off with a bang this week. Let's give our predictions for our respective games this week. Bailey, ladies first, do the Niners get back on track, and why or why not?
My short answer is yes, the Niners do get back in the win column this week. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks, if I can do the math right. They've had 3 straight losses. Yes, they're taking on the Bears. We know that is kind of a dumpster fire in and of itself. You could argue the same thing maybe for the Niners this year. But I do think that at this point, the Niners are just desperate for a win.
Gerard, the Rams might be the dark horse in the division, but a tough matchup this week. What do you think will happen?
Well, Aaron, I'm going to predict a high-scoring game. That's where I'm going with this thing. Of course, they host the Buffalo Bills, one of the best in the league right now. Buffalo's averaging almost 30 a game. The Rams are averaging 21. The Bills surrender just over 18. The Rams are giving up 24 with that very young defense. That's a little bit inconsistent. Obviously, it's Josh Allen against Matthew Stafford, 2 of the best in the game today. Allen's completing his passes at a 65% clip. 20 touchdowns against just 5 interceptions. As I said, the Rams defense is young and inconsistent. They give up 360 yards per game. At 6-6, they continue to play inconsistent football. We don't really know who's going to show up from Sunday to Sunday. So with a clear conscience, I can't predict the Rams are going to win, but I am going to predict it's going to be a high-scoring game. The line in this game, Aaron, went from 4.5 for Buffalo down to 3.5. The over-under's at 49. I do believe it's going to be a plus 50-point scoring affair between these two teams. But I will say this. If the Rams can somehow play perfect football in all 3 phases, they've got a shot. But right now, I got to give the prediction to be the Bills winning this one in a close, high-scoring game.
Yeah, any high-scoring game is a lot of fun for fans to watch, so we will look forward to that one. I'll go next. The Seahawks at the Cardinals. Listen, it's never easy to beat the same team twice in a season, let alone twice in just a 3-week span. And I know the urgency is pretty high for the Cardinals after 2 straight losses, but I think the urgency is just as strong with Seattle. The analytics site FTN Fantasy ran simulations, and if the Seahawks win this game, they have a 64% chance of making the playoffs. That drops to just 11% if they lose. So Seattle might be in first place right now, but this is a massive opportunity. I mentioned before, they turned a huge corner by beating the Niners in Santa Clara. They have not lost since their bye week. They're approaching every game like a playoff game right now, and it has worked so far. And best of all, this defense is playing like a top defense. Over the last 4 games, they're top 5 in points allowed, total yards allowed, and rushing yards allowed. That's made a huge difference, and I think the Seahawks win. And when they do, that's essentially a 3-game lead over Arizona if you include head-to-head tiebreakers. So the implications of this one are massive. And Robbie, I'm assuming you've got something to say about my prediction.
Honestly, your prediction is kind of what I was going to predict. My heart says the Cardinals get a win in this game, but my head says the Seahawks, and it's because of the point you made right there, Aaron. The Seahawks have not lost since their bye week. The Cardinals have not won since their bye week. If this game was played a month ago, I'd probably say, yeah, the Cardinals, they're rolling. Things are going well for this team. But since the bye week, it seems like it's kind of zapped the Cardinals' mojo a little bit. And when you look at the way the Seahawks have been playing, Kyler Murray said it himself at the podium this week, Seattle's kind of got a bit of a swagger to them right now. Kyler said he expects the Seahawks to come to the desert with a bit of a swagger in their step because that's the kind of football and the consistent football that the Seahawks have been playing lately. And when you look at that matchup from 2 weeks ago, the 2 stats that really stand out is the Cardinals were limited to just 49 yards rushing in that game, and they were 3 for 12 on 3rd downs. Now, you hope being at home at State Farm Stadium. The home crowd should be, help the Cardinals a little bit when they're in those third down situations, trying to get James Conner going. But I'm kind of in I need to see it before I believe it with this Cardinals team at stretches in this season. They totally convinced me before the bye week, and now coming off the bye week, we've seen Kyler Murray kind of making some of those errors that he has been prone to make at times with the back-breaking pick six against Seattle. There was another head-scratching interception against Minnesota. If the Cardinals put it all together, they can certainly win on Sunday, but I'm not entirely sure that they can put it all together. And I will say real quick, Aaron, I'll address the elephant in the room. It was brought to my attention before we started taping that I guess Richard Sines did welcome you out to a candlelit steak dinner when you guys were out here for the game this weekend. Unfortunately, we did not plan for Arizona State to be playing in the Big 12 championship game. So Richard's in Texas for that. But I just want you to know that dinner, that's transferable. So that, whoever anybody in the Fox 10 sports department, we can make it happen.
I thought Richard looked at the stat sheet and saw the Seahawks were 9-1-1 at State Farm Stadium against the Cardinals the last 11 years and just skipped out of town. But I appreciate that. That is transferable, and I appreciate that. Next question. What is the biggest area of your team that's holding them back this year? Gerard, I'm going to start with you.
Aaron, this is an easy one. Red zone consistency for the offense. I mean, they are ranked 19th in the league in red zone scoring touchdowns, under 54% of the time. That's the clip that they're performing at. Now, that number's improved over the last 3 games. Went up to 72% because they went 3 for 3 against the Saints in the second half in their win at New Orleans after getting shut out for the first half of the game, which is very unlike a Sean McVay team. But it must be noted that this game Sunday is at SoFi. And at SoFi, they are still only scoring touchdowns under 57% of the time when they are in the red zone. That will not get it done against the Bills. That clip is probably going to have to be every time they get in the red zone. I think they're going to have to score a touchdown because they're not going to get in every single time they cross the 50 against that Bills defense. That's really, if they want to have a chance at beating the Bills, they've got to be perfect this week, and that has been their weakness.
Robbie, we'll go back to you. You're up next. What's holding the Cardinals back from being great this season?
It's kind of hard to say it's the Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray connection because if you look at the stats in a bubble, Marvin has had a solid rookie season. He's second on the team in receiving yards. He does have 7 touchdowns. He's averaging about 15 yards per catch. But those stats don't tell the whole story because every game there is about 2 to 3 plays where Kyler and Marvin just aren't on the same page. And Kyler said it this week. They're still working on it. It's a work in progress. And perhaps it was unfair, the expectations that we had for Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in with how well he played at Ohio State, his draft position, the comparisons to Larry Fitzgerald. If you look at a guy on this Cardinals team like Trey McBride, drafted in the second round, the top tight end drafted in his draft class, it took Trey a couple years to become one of the top tight ends in the league like he is now. Perhaps it will take Marvin a couple of years to get up to the full potential that we expect him to be at. But for this team to go where they want it to go, yes, James Conner has to keep being the bell cow on the ground. Yes, Kyler Murray needs to protect the ball. The defense needs to keep kind of punching above its weight as well. But Marvin Harrison Jr. needs to have some games, needs to have some moments and more moments in games where he just takes over. The only time that I can really remember he totally just dominated a game was against the Rams early in the season where he had 2 big touchdowns in the first half and just kind of took the wind out of the Rams' sails. He needs to have some more moments and more games like that down the stretch if the Cardinals are going to get where they want to go.
If you're talking about Ohio State receivers, it took 1.5 years for Jackson Smith and Jigba to get going for the Seahawks. So hopefully we'll have a similar effect for Marvin Harrison Jr. in Arizona. I'm going to go next. The Seahawks. Some people will say special teams has been their Achilles heel, and that was apparent last week with the fumbles on the kick returns. But I think it's a combination of 2 things. The offensive line and turnovers. The O-line has struggled all year long to get a decent push up front. It's affecting their run game, especially in short yardage situations. Geno Smith is the 3rd most sacked quarterback in the league. I'd also argue it's a big reason why he has the 2nd most interceptions this season as well. If they ultimately falter down the stretch, the O-line is going to be a big reason why. And this could be one of the few times general manager John Schneider is seen in a less than stellar light. His failure to invest money into quality offensive linemen, particularly on the interior of that line. And playing off of that, The Seahawks have a -6 turnover ratio this season. That's tied for 24th in the league. It's also the worst turnover ratio they've had since Pete Carroll's very first season, all the way back in 2010. And again, they are 90-19 since 2010 when they win the turnover battle. The only problem is, in 12 games this season, they've won the turnover battle just twice. And shocker, they won both those games. So they might be forcing turnovers the last few weeks, but they're also giving the ball up too much as well. Start winning the turnover battles, and they will ultimately win the war. And Bailey, you're next. Dare I venture to say that it's injuries with the Niners this season?
Well, that's kind of what I brainstormed, but I think that's a little bit of the easy answer. I mean, you mentioned the Seahawks Achilles heel. Those words are a little bit of they bring out some PTSD in Niners fans, of course, with the Christian McCaffrey first IR round this season. Of course, he ends up right back on the IR not too long after that, and they've just had a whole slew of injuries. CMC, of course, not the only one, but I would also say this team just looks, from being in the locker room, being around them all season, they really just looked exhausted, like deflated, maybe a little bit depressed. I think part of that is because, yeah, you could argue they're not winning games, right? They're not having the same level of success that these fans, this team, this franchise is used to for the past couple seasons. But you have to remember, they have had very short off seasons. They've made deep runs in the playoffs for the last couple of years, and I think that catches up with a team after a while, and I think that is what we're starting to see, and it can kind of make itself presentable in multiple ways, and I think it's coming out in injuries, and it's coming out in just those little mistakes. Yes, special teams has been an issue all season long. Yes, red zone offense has also been an issue all season long, but you can't get a team to go when you don't have a solid team, and they really haven't had a solid lineup since before the season started. Of course, then you get Brandon Ayuk, who goes out, and some of your stars just aren't as reliable, but
Yeah, just really bad breaks for McCaffrey all season long. Jordan Mason last week as well, but a good break for whoever had waiver priority this past week in fantasy football leagues if they picked up Garendo before the playoffs. Next up, what will your team's record be at the end of the season, and why, based on predictions for the next 5 weeks? Robbie, your turn to lead us off.
I'll start off with the final prediction. I think if things go as well as they can for the Cardinals, I'll say 9-8. Like I already said at the top of the show, I think they'll lose this weekend to Seattle. Then you got the Panthers and the Patriots. Those should be wins for the Cardinals. The Rams game is kind of a toss-up in there. The Rams and the Cardinals will probably be in similar situations, still trying to vie for an NFC West position, an NFC West title, NFC West playoff positioning. And then it comes down to that final game against the 49ers. If the 49ers season keeps trending the way it is, what will the 49ers have left to play for? Will they have anything left to play for in the final week of the season? If everything goes the way it should, in the best case scenario for the Cardinals, I would say around 9-8. That is a huge improvement, obviously, from last season. Above 500 shows that Jonathan Gannon, the staff, everything is going in the right direction. And 9 wins probably doesn't get you in the playoffs, but you're in the hunt all the way to the end. And who knows, depending on what some other teams do, you may end up being able to sneak your way in.
And Bailey, you're going next. What will the Niners' final regular season record be, and why?
I think whatever it ends up being at this point will be well below what people had expected coming into the season. I'm going to guess that they finish right at the 500 mark. They had a tough couple of stretches of games just the last couple of weeks. Things get maybe a teeny bit easier. You face a Miami team that I personally think is a little more threatening than the record might let on. But I think you mentioned injuries. I think you talk about Nick Bosa, you talk about Fred Warner, Trent Williams. I think these are all guys that they're just going to kind of shut down as this season looks to be maybe a playoff-less season for the Niners. Why risk injuring those guys further? And of course, if you don't have your superstars out on the field, you're not going to perform up to the level as you would if they were on the field.
And I will take it next. I think the Seahawks finish at 10-7, which either wins the division or it comes down to a tiebreak with another team, and it could go either way. The Hawks' schedule pretty tough the next 5 weeks. There are no gimmies, 2 divisional games on the road, 3 straight games against the NFC North with the Packers and Vikings coming to Seattle, and then a trip to Chicago the day after Christmas. Here's the thing, though. The Seahawks are 4-1 on the road this season. I think I'd be hard-pressed to say they'll definitely win this game or definitely win that game, but I think they come out of the next 5-game stretch winning 3 of those games, and so that leaves them at 10-7. Most of us thought that 10 wins would win the division a couple weeks ago. I still think that's the magic number. And the question is, Gerard, will the Rams make it to 10 wins as well?
Aaron, I'm going to probably slide in a little bit of homerism here, but I believe they will. At 6-6 right now, as I said, they probably need to play the perfect game to beat the Bills. So let's just say they don't do that. Okay, I do believe, though, that they will go to San Francisco and beat the Niners. They already beat the Niners once this season without CMC. And obviously the game's at Levi's, that's a little bit different. But I believe that they can win that game, providing they don't sustain any major injuries this week against Buffalo. Okay, they go to San Francisco, beat the Niners. You get the Jets on the road in the NYC. Everyone's beating the Jets. So that's very believable that that can happen. And then they come back to SoFi. They get the Cardinals, where they have played historically well against Arizona at home. And they get Seattle. You win that game, you finish 10-7. You have the tiebreak over the Seahawks. That should win you the division, and they're in. So I see a clear path, even if they lose Sunday, where they could get it done by winning out the rest of the way.
Yeah, and that would be something that would come down to the Seahawks and Rams in the final week of the season. That would potentially be a primetime game, or at least slid to a primetime slot either on Saturday or Sunday that week. We would look forward to that one. Finally, we end our show with something we haven't discussed all season. What is the most notable or unique fan tradition for your team that most football fans outside your city wouldn't know about? I'll go first on this. I would venture to say that most football fans outside Seattle haven't really heard of Blue Friday before. I mean, this comes with a caveat because Blue Friday has kind of died down in Seattle over the last few years since the Seahawks haven't been the greatest team. But if they happen to make this run to the playoffs, you will see Blue Friday in full gear with people all over the city wearing their Seahawks blue, their Seahawks jerseys to work and to school on the Friday before every game. Early on in the Russell Wilson era and the Super Bowl runs, we had a special Blue Friday tailgate at the stadium every Friday morning with the Seahawks dancers and Blue Thunder, their drum troupe. It's just another way to galvanize a fan base and get them fired up for the game each week. So watch for Blue Fridays to start happening again if the Seahawks can get on a run the next few weeks and clinch a playoff spot. Bailey, you're next. Any Niners traditions we're unaware of?
Not necessarily any traditions. I will say I don't think Niners fans need just a specific, not to talk too much trash, but need a specific day of the week to wear their red and gold. I see it all around the city, all around the Bay Area, all the time. Does not matter what day of the week it is. Doesn't need to be Friday, doesn't need to be Sunday.
This is where we cut Bailey off. She starts mocking other teams like this, and then all of a sudden we're going to freeze her and cut you off. Bailey, we'll go back to you quickly if we can hear you again.
Oh, you can. Okay, so I would just say they wake up so early for tailgates. Before I'm even awake for game days, I have to get here pretty early. They're already in line for the parking lot. So I would say that's kind of blown me away about this fan base and their willingness to travel.
Do I have to remind Niners fans, didn't they have like instructions from the crowd or the big speaker on when the crowd should cheer like 10 years ago? I mean, what was that going on there, whether it was Levi's Stadium or the old Candlestick Park? I tend to remember something like that. Gerard, you're next. Give me a Rams tradition we don't know about.
Well, I'm not going to call it a tradition, but what I'm going to say, Aaron, is that, of course, this is L.A., so we know how to do a lot of things right here when it comes to celebrating, partying, all that good stuff. Despite the fact that the Rams, and I'm going to include the Chargers in this as well, despite the fact that both teams have only been back in L.A. for a short amount of time, tailgating outside SoFi is unreal. Now, visiting fans would not find this out unless they come here, but there's a huge lot, and they get it going early, and I know it's not a traditional city like Kansas City and Arrowhead, Green Bay and Lambeau, or even Buffalo and with the Bills. But when you go outside, and I can attest to this by doing stories when these teams moved into SoFi, when you go outside before the game, it is off the hook. DJs all over the parking lot playing all sorts of music, barbecue, fried this, fried that, deep fried this, deep fried that, and of course everyone is boozing hard. That's just the way it rolls here in Los Angeles. The tailgating here is underrated. Trust me on this. People would not know unless they've been to SoFi.
Well, can't wait to try that out. I'm going to have to go to Southern California and be part of that. By the way, Niners Nation, SB Nation article from 2013. Yes, the Niners did send out a home field advantage plan for the coming week. That was in 2013 to remind their fans how they can have the biggest home field advantage for game day, with instructions on how their fans could cheer for their home team. Unbelievable. Finally, Robbie, saving the best tradition for last, or so we hope. What do you say about the Cardinals?
It's funny, Aaron, you brought up the home field advantage thing, because I took this in a totally different direction. Kind of the State Farm Stadium tradition, if you will, for the Cardinals, that it almost seems like the Cardinals never play a home game. There are so many visiting fans every time we go to a game at State Farm Stadium. It seems like whether it was Detroit this year, the stadium was like 70% Honolulu blue. Whenever the Steelers come to town, the Packers, there's been some great rivalry with the Packers over the years when Aaron Rodgers was there in some playoff runs. It seems like there's more Packers fans. Now, I will say the caveat is obviously Arizona is kind of a transplant city. I'm kind of one of, I would say, the generation that was kind of, you could say they're from Arizona, grew up here, but our parents, my parents, my friends' parents, everybody moved here from the Midwest and the East Coast and everything. So that's kind of the wrinkle to that. But I say this a bit in jest, too. Obviously, it is a fun atmosphere. There is great tailgating. The Cardinals have their big red siren they do before the games and things like that to get the crowd going. But there are many times that we sit up in the press box and Richard and I look around and it's like, I thought we were, is this Arizona? Nope, no, this is definitely Detroit this week. This is interesting.
Oh, we love that. And hopefully, I mean, at least from a Seahawks perspective, the 12s will take over the stadium this week, as they tend to do down in Arizona every single year. That's going to do it for us. A reminder, you can stream the NFC West Huddle anytime on the Fox Local app. We'll be here next week with all the news around the division. Thanks so much, guys, and we will see you all next week.